want to remind everybody that we can hear anything, so I'm glad he's reminding us to mute. I sent out that email about Tom LaBonge and how sad we were to hear that he passed away. He was a good friend to the Historical Society way before I got involved with it. But I knew him specifically because I lived on Norton, so he was my councilman for many years. And then when I got active in the HPOZ, he was there all the time with Carolyn Ramsey, and they were great. They ushered that through, and it made it easier for the other areas to get an HPOZ. And he always remembered your face. And I have a picture, and I should have posted that too. There was a picture that was taken of him and I on Larchmont. And I just was always surprised that he remembered like everyone's face. So he was a great politician that way. Well, he'll be missed. I want to say happy birthday to Miss Jane Gilman tonight. I don't know how old she is. Is she here, Miss Jane?
I don't think.
No?
No, I don't think so.
You know, I didn't call her today. But anyway, today is Jane Gilman's birthday. If you want to send her an email, I think she might appreciate it. I'm starting something new here. We have 4 brand new members who've never joined the Historical Society before. You know, we send out, I want to remind everybody too, if you haven't paid your dues, we want your dues, we need to function, we have rent, we have, you know, this and that to pay. So we did send out application, the new application and a letter about 2 weeks ago. So things are coming in, but we'd love to get them all in as soon as possible. We have 4 members, and I know Fred was here last time, Fred Denenberg. So we have Fred Denenberg. We have Esther Chrisman. Is Esther here? No. We have Reggie Sully. Reggie here? No. And we have.
They're not supposed to be speaking anyway because they're muted.
Oh, I wanted them to like say hello. Can we do that?
Yes, they can. If you're a new member, you can unmute yourself and then.
Okay, Fred. Here's what we want to do. We wanted you to say hello and say like quickly how who you are, your connection to the Historical Society, why you joined, and how much money you have in the bank. So quick, go ahead, say something.
Well, my name's Fred Denenberg. I live in the mountains of San Diego right now. I own 2 apartment buildings. One is on Norton, and the architect was Gregory R. Evans, who did the Paramount Ballroom, 1923. And I own another building that's not quite Hancock Park. It's on Meadowbrook, which is where Highland and La Brea meet at 1107 Meadowbrook Avenue. And that was designed by architect H. William Green in 1939.
Oh, it's nice that you know all these things. That's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research to find out who did these buildings.
Wonderful. Well, Fred is a brand new member, and I know Fred for a while because the last time we talked, I used to live on Norton over there. So we also have, if Esther Chrisman's here, or Reggie Sully, or Matthew and Bethany Jacobs. Are they here?
I will say hello for Reggie. He's a friend of mine that, Hillary Stevens, that joined because he wanted to hear the lecture on Hancock Park. He's born and raised here. Very involved with the Institute of Classical Art and Architecture. He works for McCoy Construction, has built a lot of like what is known as the Beverly Hills Hillbilly House, Chartwell. He built that, was the project manager for Parentio when he built that estate, and so is very interested in caretaker of Oz. Actually sat with Tom LaBonge and him at a charity event a couple years ago now. Tom wanted to come up and see Oz. So Reggie's just very involved, knows all the crooks and nannies, what's that word? Anyways, knows everything about LA. He loves where all the bodies are buried and everybody, and knows a lot about a lot of the buildings here.
Oh, nice. He'll have to introduce himself the next time too. That'll be great. And how about, thanks, Hillary. How about Matthew and Bethany Jacobs? Are they here? No? Okay. All right, so we'll get them the next time. I want to say something, when you're a member of the society, our society, and we don't have COVID surrounding us, we usually have like, every month we have an event, and membership prices are less than the regular prices. So that's a little incentive to join that. But we don't have that right now because we don't want to go higher than $10 on these things. So what we're doing, as long as this COVID things last, but I think what we're planning on doing is, we have the society since 1976 has been, and I haven't been involved since then, but since 76 has been doing research on houses in Hancock Park and Windsor Square, through Fluff and all the other people in this organization for so many years. And we don't even know how many houses we have researched. So we know, because we were organizing this book with Brett Parsons, like we know that there's 300 of the binders of these houses, very detailed. But then there's also the historical observers. So what we're doing, we're in the process of putting them onto the website. It'll be a special thing. It hasn't been launched yet. It'll be within the next month. We're trying to do it once a week. We're not certain if that's going to happen. We also, I think besides Brett, we have to get a few other people that want to do this. There's a template. It's very easy. You got to just put the story in and it's already done. It's just a matter of organizing it. So today I thought maybe he needs some other people to do this with him. Anyway, but he's taken this on. So why I'm bringing this up is because these house histories, like he did the one on, who was it, Anne Coombs' house on Plymouth, that house everyone loves on the west side of the street. He did that first. And so we're going to send that out to everybody. But what we're doing is we're going to have them as part of the website so that members can go in and with a password or a key, whatever, we're going to figure that out. And you could these will only be accessible to members. So we only have like one right now, but it's going to be organized where we have a lot more. So anyway, that's one of the incentives we have for joining. We hope you all join. Now, I'm just going to go quickly through the upcoming events before I get to Bob Inman. February 17th, we have the Bunker Hill, Los Angeles, Essence of Sunshine and Noir by Nathan Marsack. And I hear Nathan Marsack is quite a personality, so I'm really looking forward to this one.
Indeed.
Yeah, I heard that he is, right? March 17th is Clubhouse Turn, The Twilight of Hollywood Park Racetrack by Michelle Asselin. April 21st is Paul Revere Williams, part of the Masters of Southern California Architects, 1920 to 1940. A lot of you know that this is a series of books that Brett Parsons and Mark Appleton have been working on with other people. And Stephen G., who did our wonderful presentation at the Bullock's Wilshire Tea a couple years ago, he's joined them with this. So the three of them are going to be here for the April 21st event. May 12th is Judson Innovation in Stained Glass by David Judson. And then June, of course, we don't have the date yet, is the Radio City that we all want to see again because we loved it so much on Saturday. Now it's time for our guest speaker, who we were supposed to have last March, but of course, COVID came about. So this is an architectural guidebook to Los Angeles. This is the 6th edition, but for the first time it is being published by Angel City Press. Originally authored over 50 years ago by renowned architectural historians Robert Winter, described by Los Angeles Magazine as both the spiritual godfather and father of Los Angeles architecture, as well as the late, great David Gephardt. The seminal, oh my God, it's a little dark over here. The seminal, what is this? The Vade Mecum, I should have read this before, of Los Angeles architecture explores every rich potency of the often relentless, but sometimes, as captured here, relenting LA cityscape. Some people keep this in their, I posted this to lots of groups on Facebook to drum up some people, some excitement. And one lady said, I keep this in my car every Thursday. My husband and I drive around the city. And I thought, you know what, that's such a great idea. I think I want to do that. Anyway, without further ado, you guys have been very patient. I'm going to introduce Mr. Robert Inman. Take it away, Robert.
Hi there. You hear me fine?
Yes.
Good. All right. And before I go to screen, because I will forget to do this later, I will share a Tom LeBon's memory. I went to John Marshall as well as Tom LeBon. He was about 3 years my junior. And I'll never forget, I went from Marshall to Occidental College, and here I was probably only 19 or 20. So Tom would have only been about 16 or 17. He didn't know me and I didn't know him. And for whatever reason, he just sprinted up to find me. We were at a football game at Occidental. sprinted up, stuck out his hand, wanted to make sure that I knew who he was and wanted to know who I was. And kids don't do that. And so he really was born to that. I mean, I never forget that of him. But let's go on to my presentation here. And is this it? Let's see.
Here we go.
And there we go. Okay, so yes, I'm here to give you a presentation on our revised Architectural Guidebook to Los Angeles. This is a project that was begun 55 years ago. You can see the 5 editions that came out before. You can see they came out about once a decade. And this was a project undertaken by 2 academics. David Gebhardt was a professor of architectural history at University of California, Santa Barbara. He was also the director of the University Art Gallery. Robert Winter, probably better known to some of you, known locally with his association with Occidental College, with Pasadena, with the Craftsman movement, with the Royal Seiko, and with Ernest Batchelder. And I was asking if anyone has a Bob Winter story or memory, even if you just heard him talk and he made an impression, use the chat feature, and I'd love to see those later. Of course, I don't run into this very often, but certainly if you knew David Gebhardt from UCSB, I'd love to hear that too. So here's the theme tonight. What makes these neighborhoods special, and how to do the buildings here relate to, because our guidebook is not just about Windsor Square, Hancock Park, it's about all of LA County. And this area that, when I say this, I'm talking about your area, is a wonderful enclave, but it's not a bubble. And the architecture here does relate in many ways to the built environment of the county as a whole. This print may be small for some of you, depending on your device, but this is our table of contents. I mean, it's a huge undertaking. It's 13 chapters, 95 sections, covers from Lancaster to Long Beach, from Calabasas to Claremont. And you can see here with the yellow arrow, our section says Windsor Square, Hancock Park, found within a chapter that we identified as Midtown Los Angeles. So characteristics that make Hancock Park and Windsor Square exceptional. I, like most people, use the freeways of Los Angeles as kind of a reference grid. They're our mental compass, and very often it's like, well, what freeway is that on? And one of the exceptional things about this area, it is not on a freeway, but we spoke about this if you came to the Jane Gilman presentation a month ago. It could have been on a freeway. You see the dotted line that Thomas Brothers Maps in 1969 very confidently said, this freeway is coming. It was the extension of the 2 freeway from Silver Lake and Echo Park. It would make a big curve, parallel Melrose, right on the top of your neighborhoods, and then head west, pick up the trace of Santa Monica Boulevard and head to the 405. So things that make this area exceptional, I don't need to tell you, beautiful streets, wide streets, very serene streets, wonderful street trees, houses that are set back from the street, and a relative absence of privacy screens and fences. You can see the houses. It's just a wonderful place to walk or drive, and I'm sure to live. But I think most people would think of what do they identify most with this, something exceptional about this area. It's the amazing inventory of historic homes, and showing you the maps of your HPOZ side by side. The orange indicate properties that are contributing to the historic architectural qualities of the area. And so you see percentages of like 90%. That's a very high percentage. It means only 10% not complying. And so another thing I think of is exceptional about this area is Larchmont. I've lost, oh, I see where my titles. Larchmont is, I love how this neighborhood is focused in on this wonderful retail boulevard. It doesn't look now like it did when the Three Stooges were motoring up, but it has, you know, great scale. It has good retail vitality. I know some of you who lived here a long time will say, well, it's not what it used to be. And I'm sure that's true, but it's still, I think Larchmont is the measuring stick that other communities use that even hope to have a vibrant commercial street, that they always come back, well, how does it compare to Larchmont? Okay, another thing that I think makes this area exceptional is its relationship to Wilshire Boulevard. Wilshire Boulevard, of course, is the southern boundary of Windsor Square and Hancock Park. And the fact that, I mean, you're found here on the Grand Concourse of Los Angeles. Wilshire Boulevard was this audacious experiment. It started far to the east of here. It began when Wilshire Boulevard out here was just, Camino Viejo, just a sketchy path. It was a 1,200-foot long street that was designed to be elegant. And one thing they got from the city in the beginning is no trains, no streetcars, no heavy hauling on Wilshire, no industrial use. And that was for the original part near downtown, but that theme extended through as Wilshire extended across to the sea. That's something that you still have. A guidebook like this is very much about architectural styles, and you don't want to get caught up in that too much. Architectural styles are what I'm going to talk about a lot tonight is exceptions to the rule. But you can see here the predominant styles that are we find in these two neighborhoods, and I'm going to display a few of them, and I'm going to display some other styles. The first three styles I'm going to mention are kind of get fused together. The Monterey Revival. This is, of course, is the house that Howard Hughes made home for a decade and a half. And I want to mention this, the photograph, of course, yes, I'm outside the fence, outside the gate. I'm using this as kind of kind of symbolize the honesty we're trying to approach with the guidebook. The guidebook is about what someone can go out and see for themselves. It's not about inside views and special invitations. It's not about grand estates that are way back up on where you can't see from the street. We built this guidebook on what you can see. So another example, as I'm going outside of Hancock Park, Windsor Square, same architect, Roland Coate, about the same year, 1 year different, but Monterey Revival. And this style is very much about horizontal in character and featuring these cantilevered second floor balconies or two-story porches. That's really the primary thing that sets aside Monterey Revival. Then another great style we have in Southern California is Spanish Colonial Revival with this really superb building or residence in your neighborhood. Spanish Colonial Revival is has many characteristics because it's like many branches to a tree. The term is tied to the styles related to the neoclassic of Spain or colonies, as well as Moorish from southern Spain and North Africa. But when this style really came into use in the mid-1910s, and no one called it Spanish Colonial Revival then. In fact, very often they might have just called it Mediterranean. And here's it, Mediterranean actually now, as we look at styles, is different. Mediterranean, as our guidebook says in the end, it maybe might have been better to call Tuscan Revival style. It's the source of comes from the numerous books published between 1900 and 1930, illustrating Italian rural villas and their gardens. But you see those first three styles, a lot of people would say, well, they're all Spanish colonial revival, they're all Mediterranean, and because they have, the red tile roofs. But when dicing and slicing, they are considered different styles. Now, Art Deco is very much different from those styles, of course, very popular, the style of entertainment in the area all around the country in the 1920s. Single family dwellings expressing Art Deco are fairly unusual in Southern California. This one, our guidebook says Paris would be proud of it. Just very, very elegant. More often we see the Art Deco expressed in like apartment buildings, some office buildings, some, of course, the movie theaters of that era. Here you see the zigzags around the window, and then windows, a detailing above the windows, and then the vertical Art Deco very often was used to emphasize verticality even more so than that was there. It just would emphasize verticality. Another example of this Art Deco that we find just on the edge of Hancock Park, the Deco building, it doesn't, it's not much there. It's just, it was built as a bank. I mean, it sits next to a Jack-in-the-Box, but it's a highly treasured. Look at the date, 1929. Look at Morgan Walls and Clements as the architects, and it's the fact it's this black terracotta with gold. Architectural fans love this building because it kind of represents what we lost. Look at the same date, 1929, same architects. The Richfield building across from the Central Library downtown was demolished, one of our great lost landmarks in Los Angeles, one of the favorite buildings in the area in history. And the same thing, black and gold. And so people love your building at La Brea and Wilshire very often because it kind of reflects our history here on a grander scale. Streamline modern, sometimes confused or fused together with Art Deco. Came a little bit later. Streamline modern is not about verticality. Streamline modern is very much about curves and flow and movement, curves and the windows. Lots of flowing lines. Even see the steps on the lower right there. The steps are very much in that streamline mode with those curves. Very much sometimes a nautical motifs, as you see here with the portholes. Also, streamline modern, you also would see went hand in hand with the grand locomotives and airplanes and cars of that era. If you watch the Hercule Poirot TV show, very often the series is all full of streamline modern. I love it. And it's a very hugely popular style. People just go gaga over these images. Of course, in Los Angeles, the real most famous exhibit of streamline modern is the Coca-Cola Bottling Company by Robert Duras. It just, once again, loads of portholes and railings as something. I mean, certainly the nautical motif with the bridge, and this is dressed up and ready to float down Central Avenue. So another style, like I mentioned, I'm talking a lot about exceptions there. I'm not talking about, in some instances, about what's typical in Windsor Square and Hancock Park. I'm just throwing out some surprises because that's what this guidebook does very often. So you don't usually associate the modern international style with this area, but this is a very good example found on Citrus. The international style architects took machines as their metaphor, clean lines suggesting a Spartan aesthetic of geometric arrangements and white surfaces. Look at this next one. To tell you the truth, I I saw this building for the first time this morning and took this picture. Because shows where this is international style, but it hasn't departed very far from streamline modern. I mean, look at the curve above the second floor windows. You can't see it well here, but there's a lot of glass block around the doorway and some curves leading into the entrance. So there's still a little bit of that curved streamline modern going on. And look at the date, 1937, is that very much the center of streamline modern. But we would say more, this is an international house. And of course, Southern California has some of the great examples of residential modern or international style, and certainly the Level House in Los Feliz is one of the greats. Richard Neutra is the main commanding figure of this style in this area and practiced for about 40 years. Often also, of course, people think of Rudolf Schindler, who was also very strong in this style. Another style that is kind of an offshoot of other styles, but I mean, you have this wonderful example in Hancock Park is Hollywood Regency. This is very often you don't see Hollywood Regency buildings because they are set apart by shrubbery and fences and stuff. So this is one you can see right from Rimpaw. And Hollywood Regency was the image of old Hollywood grace. You see that doorway, they called that the Pullman doors. It was kind of a tie-in to the Pullman doors of the old railroad cars. But John Wolfe, you see the architect, John Wolfe, and you see the architect here, is the first person you think of when you talk about Hollywood Regency in Southern California, certainly. And it was kind of a style of the stars. This Greta Garbo lived in this house for a little while, but it's mainly associated with Robert Evans, who lived there for decades. Of course, he was a producer and one time boss of the Paramount Pictures lot. And then programmatic is more an architectural effect than a style. Oh, thank you, Richard. I added your correction because yes, Edward Borgmeyer does belong to this credit. Wonderful building you have just, on the south side of Wilshire, a couple of blocks west of La Brea. And of course, it doesn't quite look this good anymore. It's still very recognizable, but Bob Winter must have taken this photo in the early 1960s. And the programmatic is a style of building design characterized by unusual building designs that mimic the purpose or function of the building or the product it's associated with. And of course, it's perfect for Los Angeles for the age of the automobile. I mean, most people would think, well, programmatic architecture, they just think Randy's Donuts, or something like that. And we have some wonderful examples. People love to see examples of programmatic architecture. And, we have lost many. And so I'm throwing out a few more, some of the ones we have. This is one in Long Beach that for years, the Winter Gebhardt guide would always say, you better look at it now because it's going to be gone. And I'm here to tell you it looks great. I mean, it's been preserved. And it's just a little place with the coffee pot. And of course, the Tamale has seen better days, but that's out there on Whittier Boulevard. Sometimes a programmatic, the image is not, this is actually, you would say it's Art Deco as far as the tower, but the programmatic is in the symbols. I mean, this was a company associated with the automobile, and it has these tires and wheels along the frieze. And of course, we think of something like Randy's Donuts, but the donut hole in La Puente is another great example of programmatic. And I think people love to find that in our guidebook because it's not all serious stuff. So one of the great themes I love about looking at this area, and Windsor Square in particular, is this phenomena of landmark homes that have been moved into Windsor Square, where this is the case. These are homes that were built much closer to downtown Los Angeles, very elegant, wealthy homes owned by wealthy people. They loved their home. They just wanted, Windsor Square was the next big thing, and they wanted to keep their home, but they wanted to go to Windsor Square, so they had their home cut up and hauled across town. And Like the Verbeck mansion, these homes are older than Windsor Square. I mean, this is John Austin, one of our great architects from that era. And you can't see this house quite as well now. They are unfortunate. There are some privacy screens around it. But another great example of that is the Van Nuys house. This is just around close to 6th and Alvarado. It's that's where it was hauled from, and now of course it's on 4th Street in Windsor Square. If you went to this location right now, you'd find the Rampart Division of the LAPD. But once again, a great architect, Frederick Roehrig, certainly the Van Nuys family, very wealthy family, and they said, let's go to Windsor Square and take our house with us. And this photograph is a bit of a relic already, because a lot of you who live here know that that house has been since repainted more of a blood red. I probably took this picture in 2017. But here we have it. And I think it's, once again, there's nothing else like this in Windsor Square, because the house is older than the neighborhood. Third example of a final example of this phenomenon, moving landmarks into Windsor Square. Look, the third one up from Wilshire, third one up on the left side of the block there. Craftsman style from the Heinemann brothers. Heinemann's were very important architects in Pasadena. They would have competed with Charles and Henry Green for commissions in the 19aughts, 1910s. And this house was moved to, you'll find it now on one side facing 6th Street. Interesting thing about this house is never designed to be a corner house. I mean, because you saw it had a mid-block location, and now you see the volume here on the right is what faces 6th Street, and and the other thing is, you don't find Craftsman homes much in Windsor Square, or not at all in Hancock Park, I don't think. I mean, as opposed to moving a couple miles south. By the time these neighborhoods were being developed, I think Craftsman neighborhoods was thought to be a little bit passé. So now I'm switching to highlight a couple architects. Some examples you have here, singular examples. This one's important. This is hard to see. It's behind a big green gate, but it's on Arden, just south of Melrose. Irving Gill, important and beloved architect to architectural historians, practicing mainly in the 1910s. He showed the skill of trimming down Mediterranean style into simple line, cube, and arch, and expressed it in austere stucco. This is more of a typical example of Irving Gill in Santa Fe Springs. There again, line, cube, and arch. Irving Gill, very big in San Diego, La Jolla. You'd find a lot of his work. His most famous work in LA County would have been the Dodge House, and it was destroyed unceremoniously in West Hollywood after it stood in West Hollywood. That's one of the reasons why the one I showed you in Hancock Park is so important, because it is the only remnant of Irving Gill in LA. And then here another, I'm just pointing out, oddities. Robert Stacey Judd, I mean, beautiful house. Robert Stacey Judd was born in London in 1928. Arts and Decoration illustrated this design and stated, "Oh, how delightful the English Norman architecture suits these same flower-covered lands and vivid sky of Los Angeles." And it does. I mean, this is a beautiful house, and it's on a corner and shows off very nicely. But in the region, that's not what we think of with Robert Stacey Judd, because Robert Stacey Judd was best known for his experimentation with pre-Columbian forms. He really wanted to get away from the traditional East Coast or European models. And this is, I mean, he called this the Zuni house, and Gerhard Winter called it a Pueblo revival Mayan fantasy. More fantastic the longer you look at it, but it really is sublime. And the most famous work, of course, of Robert Stacey Judd is the Aztec Hotel found on Route 66 in Monrovia. And when Robert Winter went to describe this for the guidebook, he started with a 2-word sentence, and those 2 words were "words fail." So another William Pereira. I mean, you said William Pereira didn't build houses, so you don't, he's not someone you associate with the residential architecture of Hancock Park. But this William Pereira, I did in researching this project, I found he was a resident. He lived here in Hancock Park. But the Lytton building, I mean, is surrounded by other more elaborate architecture, and you may pass this, not think about it. But it's a nice example, and William Pereira is highly beloved now for his work in the mid-1960s. And of course, what we associate with him most were the original buildings of what we now call LACMA, and the campus built in 1965 that, of course, all these buildings are now gone. And so, yes, there's a lot of William Pereira fans, and let's have a moment of silence for William Pereira. And not for him, is for these buildings, for the buildings at LACMA. And how about Frank Gehry? I mean, most people don't say, "Oh, I'm going to Hancock Park to see some Frank Gehry." And this is Hancock Park adjacent. It's on the north side of Melrose at Sycamore. Look at the date. I mean, this is Frank Gehry has been active in Southern California architecture for a long time. And he has, this was really one of his first works to get any publicity, any kind of photos in architectural guides. Our guidebook said he was moving from the world of traditional architecture to sculpture as architecture. But think of what he has gone through a lot of different phases. Think of Frank Gehry as a postmodernist here at what we now just typically call the Binoculars building, this 3-building composition. And then of course most people think most of Frank Gehry with the Disney Concert Hall. And that's, I think, internationally, when people say Frank Gehry in Southern California, they say this, or Frank Gehry worldwide. And by the way, if you haven't been to Bunker Hill in a while, across the street from this is another big Frank Gehry work going up, and it's going up pretty fast now, is the Grand Avenue project with a couple of hotels and mixed use. So another pointing out someone else you find locally in this one work, but I mean, just to relate him to the rest of Southern California, Millard Sheets with Masonic Temple, with now the late lamented Marciano Art Foundation. I mean, the Art Foundation is still there, it's just you can't visit it. And this LA Conservancy said this style was monumental, which I'd say that's okay. But we associate Millard Sheets with Pomona because he was born in Pomona. Claremont, he taught at Scripps. But we associate him with his partnership, this collaboration he had with Howard F. Amundsen Sr. It ran for more than 20 years, beginning in the mid-1970s. In the mid-1950s. Working on the home savings and loan branches. And there were many that are lost, but there's some good ones left, like this one. And he would design the buildings, and then the buildings would model the mosaic murals, and allow me to leave the district a little bit out, going to the Midwest. This is a famous Millard Sheets mural. He didn't design this building, but this mural, of course, it stands above the football stadium at Notre Dame, and given the posture of Jesus here, and of course the thoughts of football at Notre Dame, they call that building Touchdown Jesus, or the mural. So I'm going to finish with Paul Williams and have some more examples on him. And you're going to have a whole program on Paul Williams in 3 months, I think. But Paul Williams is remarkable. One of the very most figures in Los Angeles architectural history. He was born here. His production ran so many different styles, so many different client groups, so many different types of projects. Besides residential architecture, which you find here, he did He did bank buildings. He did planning for the airport, civic center downtown Los Angeles. This is early in his career, 24, 25. He was just getting started. I mean, this is a very elegant duplex on Orange Drive. And he worked, as I said, in a lot of different styles. He really worked with his clients, but he wasn't within each style. He always put his own take on it. He just never, the type, exactly the type on any one style is all. It was say, in this case, Tudor Revival, but as done by Paul Williams. In fact, I was alerted a month ago when I attended the Jane Gilman session. One thing I didn't realize in doing this book is Paul Williams has huge amount of work in Hancock Park. My main associations with him were Beverly Hills and La Cunada Flintridge, but there's a lot of Paul Williams to be found in Hancock Park. You just go up and down the streets. And Spanish Colonial Revival here, but just not typical Spanish Colonial Revival here. English Tudor Revival, of course, with a wonderful car. But, next, our book was Gebhardt Woodard, a little contradictory. First they said it was French provincial, but then they said, well, it seems to have more to do with the then popular American Colonial Revival. And then two more examples that are more typical American Colonial Revival. A lot of these are, you found, well, he's all over, but around on Las Palmas and McCadden, there's a lot of Paul Williams. And whoops, I'm sorry, I give you credit. I don't want to pass that. I hit the wrong button. Anyway, so then. Moving on, more about Paul Williams, but outside of this community. This photograph is unusual, and actually it's created a lot of misinformation in the photograph itself. Paul Williams was very much involved in the Los Angeles airport planning in the 1960s, and Julius Schulman took this picture of him in front of the theme building. He was not the architect for the theme building. The theme building came from the firm of Luckman and Pereira, and specifically attributed to Jin Wong. But I mean, having this not in Paul Williams' resume doesn't diminish his resume one bit. I mean, he just enormous contributor to this region. And just a lot of different, I mean, here, 28th Street Y, south of downtown, important building. And that is, again, 1926, this is very early in his career. And this is when African-Americans did not have recreation and pool facilities that they could use because of segregation. And so he worked in the Beaux-Arts style here. Then look at him next. Here, look at the date, 1936, very much kind of the heart of Streamline Moderne. There's a little bit of Streamline Moderne in this building, but he's, it's moving on to modern too. I mean, it's a very elegant building along Sunset. Speaking of elegance, the MCA complex, where Paul Williams worked in the late 18th century English neoclassical tradition. And the Lytton Industries took over this complex in the mid 1960s. That's why it's carries both names, but of course, it is very much what you expect of Beverly Hills. And then the Beverly Hills Hotel addition. I mean, the Beverly Hills Hotel is actually a very old building in 1912. And that's, you can see a bit of it over on the left. It was Mission Revival style. Architect was Elmer Gray. But I think most people, when they think of the hotel now, they associate it with the Paul Williams addition. But then here again, I'm just doing this chronologically. The Golden State Mutual Life was a very important Black-owned business. And he built this building for them. It still looks very good. It's been restored and adopted by another company, and it's at the corner of Adams and Western. And interesting, with facing three sides on this slanting street corner. And this is a home he built for himself. Different again. I mean, this is about 2 miles south of Hancock Park, Windsor Square. I mean, this is with this wonderful cantilevered deck. There's something here that reminds me of what John Lautner was starting to do in the early 50s. And interesting, you think of, I mean, Paul Williams, as people talk about, a lot of these homes he built, you know, he was an architect for stars and an architect for very wealthy people. He could not have even slept in the homes that he built because of the restrictive covenants of the day. My last example of his first AME church back in West Adams. So looking at, these are, think about David Gephardt and Robert Winter, what they were doing in 1965, and they really were voices in the wilderness, because that was before, certainly long before there's any internet content, but before even a lot of the essential historical preservation groups were founded. They're just, people didn't know about that stuff. They didn't talk about that stuff. And so one of the things I wanted to do with this book, with the 6th edition, is really make it, you know, there's a lot of this material now is, we're dealing with things that are covered very well by very many associations and groups and activity groups. And but what Gephardt Winter does is treat just a lot of different architects in a lot of different communities, a lot of different styles. So I mean, this is for the first time. This time we had the 6th edition. We have a new publisher, Angel City Press, that added a lot of energy, beautiful, just very sympathetic work with the tradition of what people expected of this guidebook, a good, great, wonderful design by Amy Inoue of Future Studios. And I was very proud to be part of it. I was glad that Bob Winter invited me aboard. So I think from here, we're going to have a little Q&A or any comments. I have about another 5 minutes worth of slides, more specific about Bob Winter and the Batchelder House. But I thought I would pause here. I'm right about the time schedule I said I would be. And I'll bring myself up on the screen, and let's see, go to black. And hang on a second here. And let's see, stop share. Okay.
I'd love to see the rest of the houses. What about everybody else?
Richard, do we want to do the 5 minute, the extra slides now, or?
Maybe we should do the question and answer thing, and then we'll do the slides. There's 5, I have 5 questions right over here. Let's
Okay.
see. Nancy Glassberg is asking everyone, are you doing duplexes also? I don't know what that means, Nancy. What do you mean by that? Do we know? No? All right.
Well,
go
I mean,
ahead.
I think as far as the guidebook is very much about many different types of buildings, very much about, I mean, we spend a lot of times with garden apartments, with courtyards, a lot of things we've lost. In fact, duplexes and fourplexes are an essential part of the built environment of Los Angeles in the 19 teens to the 1930s that we don't see anymore. And so, yeah, we have a lot of, we have Schindler duplexes. We have a lot of different, you know, so I mean, I guess if that's what you mean, I was actually very happy to find that example from Paul Williams, because that's very early in his career.
Patty Lombard said, what do you think lies ahead for residential architecture for LA in the future?
Yeah, it's something we kind of addressed that as we did this guidebook. the whole, compared to what they were doing with the guidebook in, say, 1965 and 1977, it's so much less about single family homes. And because ultimately Los Angeles is much less about single family homes now, I think much more now it's about when we do highlight single family architecture, is more about space planning, what's done with small lots, what's done with zero impact, and less about maybe, it's another world, I'm afraid. And I'm probably not, I'm 70 years old, I'm probably not the best one to answer that question now.
Two things having to do with the society. Sharona Alperin is asking how we can get a copy of this wonderful lecture. And Sharona, all these lectures that we've had and these wonderful people have done with us, Patty Lombard and Jane Gilman and Robert and the guys in the people in the future, these are also going to be available, like the house tours, the house histories are for members only on the website. So that's why we're encouraging you for membership, and you'll be able to have a password to get in, but you can't share it with anyone, Sharona. All right. So, and then the other one is asking about, I think the duplex question was about, has the society done any research on duplexes? I haven't seen any, but Fluff McLean, maybe you can answer that question quick. You have to unmute yourself.
Is this addressed to me?
No, Bob.
No, okay.
Fluff, real quick, has the society ever done any research on duplexes or apartment buildings? I don't think she can hear me. I don't think she can hear me. We'll do that later. Anyway.
We did
guess
give an award to an apartment building about 4 years ago.
And they have done research on apartment buildings like Los Altos that I've seen, but specific duplexes, I haven't really seen them. But maybe we should do, anybody have questions and answers for Bob? But no, I have questions. Questions and answer them. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to give you answers.
Patty's raising her hand again.
Yeah, I just wanted to pursue that line of questioning about as we move to try to densify Los Angeles, and there's a great deal of concern about destruction of single family neighborhoods. I'm wondering if you think there's an opportunity to educate architects and developers with some of these wonderful historic styles that could, choose. Why must we choose between having great architecture and housing? Could we not find some way to build great housing and incorporate what are some of these incredible historic examples?
Well, I think the results are very nuanced. I think in many cases it's not a conscious decision by an architect to, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore, I'm going to do this. I mean, and very often it has to do with municipal codes and what is allowed and what has to be done in certain properties. And that's kind of heartbreaking. I mean, there's a gentleman that's involved in urbanism in Los Angeles has this wonderful presentation about how Los Angeles that we knew what served us very well from the 1920s and 30s is impossible to duplicate because of the web of regulations. Some of the regulations are very important. I mean, some serve a lot of uses. I mean, you wouldn't want to have it be free of that. So, and I think obviously, unfortunately, money talks. I think money is available for is available for single family homes in Surrey Palisades and Malibu and these maybe Palos Verdes with great views and stellar sites, but and these when they build things up in the hills above Brentwood, they're like huge like hotels or aircraft carriers, and it is it's there's, I'm not sure what the answer is on that, but I mean, I think it's not necessarily an architect saying, goozing their way.
Mm.
There's a question from Carolyn Eaton to everyone, to Bob specifically. How has the guidebook changed over with each edition? You have an idea?
Sometimes a lot, sometimes a little. I mean, the first guidebook, I mean, is actually, they tell the story that the publisher or sponsor of the first guidebook was, no one called it LACMA then, but it was the County Museum of Art. And it was meant to be timed to this Society of Architectural Historians convention in Los Angeles, and then it wasn't published in time. But so they put out this little, if you've seen it, this beautiful little book. And they had a good budget, but it doesn't get into what they tried to do then. It doesn't even talk about, it probably would not talk at all about the traditional, the revival homes of Hancock Park. It would talk about, they figured people wanted to come in and learn about Los Angeles modernism. It also didn't talk about the craftsman movement. I mean, people think, well, how could Bob Winter's name be on a book that had nothing to do with the craftsman movement? But that's what it was in the beginning. The next time they tried something completely different. They tried to cover Southern California, and it's wonderful to use. They call it the blue brick. It was meant to fit into a car, automobile glove compartment. And then, but that was just too much. They came back to the idea of greater LA. So the third edition is quite different from the second edition. The fourth and fifth editions were kind of staying the course, not too much new, right? I mean, there's, look for some important new things and make sure you cut out the stuff that was, that's fallen down or is gone, you can't see. And I will say that the fifth edition was probably kind of weak because David Gebhardt had passed away in 1996, and 2002, Bob Winter just didn't have the help. It wasn't like he was by himself, but it just, it lagged a little bit. And so that's why it was really so really you had an edition in 1994, you had what I think was a weak edition, I guess it's 2003, and then we did ours. We started working on it in 2015 and finished it 2018, and with a lot of new information, like I said, using a lot of there's a lot of material out there, that we didn't have access to, a lot of enthusiasts that, that had things that we could use. So I think this edition is much different. I don't think it even compares to the 2003 edition. It's just so much stronger. And having Angel City, it was the publisher they had before just kind of got further and further disconnected from the idea of a Los Angeles architecture book. And of course, Angel City press is very much involved in books on the arts and architecture and social history of Los Angeles. So it's a perfect marriage. So I think this guide is really quite a bit different but it tried to be loyal. I mean, I still went line and verse with, from the previous guides and added things, took things out, but tried not to change the point of view of David Gebhardt and Robert Winter. That's their book.
John Bacon says, I have all of them, all the editions, even though now a New Yorker. So he's in New York right now. And yours is my next one.
Oh, great. Good.
Okay.
Roger in LA says, why was the Richfield building downtown torn down in 1968? And what is there now?
What's there now is what for years we called the Arco Towers. So, Arco is what Richfield became. And, corporate international style to gleaming black, smoky glass buildings, high rises, blocky. That was what of the age. There is something about people talk about don't let a landmark watch out for a landmark until it hits 40 because that's when it gets like 30, 35, the style is just, even if it's a landmark, people sort of, they think, well, what's bigger and better? And that's, and, you know, hopefully, I mean, it seems to be the case where buildings, once they reach 45, 50 years old, and then it's like, yeah, then they really is a treasure. But there's that danger zone that we just don't know what we got till it's gone. And that especially seems to apply to the things that we built. You know, although, you know, if you look at the LACMA buildings, and funny enough, Winter and Gebhardt were not very enthusiastic with the LACMA buildings originally. And I mean, that's part of the joke, was that that LACMA was their publisher, and they neglected to put the buildings in the book. But since, you know, in fact, Bob Winter, in the last 6 weeks of his life, mentioned to me how sorry he was. He just thought that what's going in now was just a complete joke, and he was so sorry that to see, you know, he thought, I mean, I maybe putting more faith in Frank Gehry than I think might have been entitled. He just thought, well, if they brought Frank Gehry in, and Frank Gehry could do a new building and keep the old buildings and make it all work together, and I just sort of said, well, there's a thought. But so, I mean, it is, you know, our opinions change. And Bob Winter at age 40 or 42, when LACMA went up, he wasn't a big fan of, you know, the work of Welton Beckett and Luckman and Pereira and some of the other people of that age. But it came to grow on him.
Do you guys have any other questions for Bob? Go ahead.
Yes.
I mean, I own the blue brick.
Hey.
And I've been purchasing, trying to keep up with the updates. Was there ever a suggestion, as you go from one edition to the other, to list the buildings that are deleted from the book, if not from the face of the earth, and to mark the new buildings new discoveries? I won't say new buildings, the new discoveries that are in the latest edition.
Well, I mean, that would be a great idea. And you understand, this is even though I've been married to the book since, you know, I bought the 1965 book when I was, you know, a college sophomore. And so I bought them all, but this is the first, you know, starting in 2015, the last 5 years, my first time on board with it. So I never really thought I was part of it. I thought about that though, and I really actually, and I did not follow through. I really thought this calls for a website that, as you say, we've kept lists. And even when I did this, for moving from, you know, the last edition to this one, I rigorously kept a list of what I took out and why I took it out. And sometimes I took out perfectly good buildings because there was a better example of the style and the architect. And I missed things we added, as you say, some things we added weren't necessarily new. It's just things that were definitely missed. And I would talk about that with Bob. I say, you know, but they, you know, to their defense, you know, they just didn't have the resources that we have now to you know, identify many of these buildings. And I mean, that's we didn't think of like putting a, you know, like an asterisk or black dot on this is new, or, you know, in the book itself. That wasn't what we're going to do.
Okay.
Now, do you miss, question for you, do you miss the maps a lot?
Yes.
Do you have the new book? Yeah.
Yes, we got the new book.
That would have also been handy if the maps were consistent from edition to edition. But I guess,
right.
What can you do?
Yeah, what can you do? I mean, the maps take a lot of space. If we'd put in all those maps, we would have not had room for a lot of the entries. And Bob Winter used to tell stories about, he was sure that David Gebhardt was dyslexic and all his directions were backwards, but and that maybe more just sort of camaraderie banter. But you know, I went into this project thinking we'd have the maps, but it just, you know, you work with the publisher and you
Yeah.
put together what, it becomes a team effort.
Yeah.
And Bob too was probably, would you rather have the maps, or would you rather have more photographs and bigger photographs and more entries? And I think it came down to the idea most people, younger people now, are using devices. They're not holding a book and saying, oh, I got to turn left here on some curving street in the Hollywood Hills. I mean, because they're using their devices anyway. But the maps are really good to show what's nearby. That's why.
Exactly. And I mean, I always carried the blue brick with me when I was in Southern California. Is there any updates of what I guess you'd call the orange brick, the architecture of Northern California?
That was, I'm afraid, a one-off. I think they left that to other people. Although, I mean, they did it very well, and I don't think I've never seen anything done in Northern California that was as complete and exhaustive as what they did in whenever in the late 70s, but that they never returned to the idea of that.
All right.
Thank you.
I have something from John Bacon, but I'm not exactly certain what it means. It says this is the guy that's got all these books in New York. It says there was a necrology in at least the brick, as I recall. Do you have any idea what that means?
I don't remember that. I got it in my bookshelf that I'd have to look at. I mean, I guess that would be these buildings are gone. I mean, what I did with this time is some of the introductory sections I would point out. Sometimes it's carrying on language that they use, but also just point out, here you would have seen this, and this is taking the place of this. And that's one of the interesting things about how Los Angeles. I mean, that's the thing, Los Angeles is always changing. That's one of the things I like about the whole story of them picking up and moving houses. Duncan McGinnis actually is in this chat or in this group, and he's the one who I got the idea about. God, they moved all these houses. And he called and referred to them as mobile homes. But I think how did I start that? But just things do. It's interesting with some spots. Even some preservation battles have been fought over phase A, and then phase 2 has been wonderful. Phase 2 has become a landmark. Well, phase 2 gets torn down. I think we see that now with the Garden of Allah and the Lytton Bank building that is going to go for a Frank Gehry building, and that's regrettable, but it is LA.
I think we should do the unless anyone has another question, I think we should do the Bob Winter slides right now.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me bring this up. Yeah, I just it isn't too much. I mean, I could do a whole show, of course, on Bob Winter, but let me just get this up and going here. And okay. So, I mean, this is Bob Winter as I met him in the late 1960s. I was a freshman at Occidental College. He's say age 40, 42, very enthusiastic person that everyone loved. Everyone kind of knew Bob Winter because he was the director of a core course at everyone, regardless of your major or academic discipline, you had to take the core course. So you got to see lots of Bob Winter. Certainly you see him as a cheerleader for the football sidelines. But he was definitely a cheerleader for Los Angeles. And I grew up in Silver Lake. I came to Occidental very much thinking LA was a cool place, and that was not exactly the going opinion in that era. This is 1968, 69. People were thinking about a lot of different things than Los Angeles. But Bob Winter would really want to, get the students to know what's out there, and give these talks. And then he had these field trips. I mean, these field trips were just momentous. I mean, we would go, we would meet Lloyd Wright and meet Rudolf Schindler's Mrs. Schindler, and Dion Neutra, and Harwell Harris just sat around and helped out, and people, we didn't know who those people were, and we went to fabulous houses. But also he would take us to, we wanted to make sure we saw the Watts Towers, wanted to make sure you got to see the pig burials and Farmer John's. I mean, he was definitely then was so delighted with Los Angeles. And, obviously, he things would drive him crazy. So he'd show us the ugly, he'd show us, and really just kind of impress upon the students on this place that we lived. Bob Winter started teaching Occidental in the early 60s. And in 1972, I think it was, he bought the houses built by and for Ernest Batchelder, the famous arts and crafts tile maker on the edge of the Royal Seco in Pasadena. And it's a great setting. It has just a real cultural landmark. It's not just because of the tiles and because of the other buildings around it. It just lives and breathes the district that it's built in. So Bob lived 94 years. He lived half his life in this house. He knew, he was a Midwesterner that went east for his university education, and both, he got his doctorate in Johns Hopkins, but he did his thesis on the organic theory in American architectural history. And then one of his advisors said, well, if you're going to do that, you should look at the arts and crafts movement, and a Royal Arts and Crafts movement, and which he didn't know anything about that. I mean, he didn't know much about California at all. And so happily he came to California and made, this is, as the story he told, Ernest Batchelder built this fireplace for his new bride, Mrs. Coleman, is going to come up, and so it's the photograph. Actually, one thing about this photograph, the room has always seemed a lot darker than this photograph looks. I mean, he said Bob lived with his mother, and his mother moved in. His mother said, what can we do to make this house brighter? And Bob said, we can't touch it, but again, it just all over the house, just examples of Batchelder tile, this fountain in the middle, out in the backyard, the back splash around the stove, and little tile details. And they've actually, if you go by it now, this was done a lot in Bob's last 20 years. There's a lot of Batchelder tile kind of built into the walkway. And it's quite an amazing spot. And he was only the third owner. First, of course, being Batchelder. And one of the stories he liked to tell was his first teaching assignment in the LA area was at UCLA. He got a position with them in the history department in the mid 1950s. And Bob would love to tell the story later. I'm sure he's quite bitter about it in the beginning, but UCLA fired him. And he says, he fired because he perished because he did not publish. But he moved on to Occidental, was hired in the history department. Occidental would not have is too small to have like an architectural history department. But he taught social history, but he used architecture very often. That was, something he loved, and he used it in his history lessons. Architecture is kind of to show off what was going on. And a lot of this was European history, but just using architecture as a window to what was going on socially. But he was, and look at the second cover on the top row, he was from Indiana, and he did this one book on At Home in the Heartland. But he very often, one of his books, you see about the craftsman movement, the bungalows. After a while, I never did, but people started calling him Bungalow Bob. He lived very close to the Gamble House, and he liked green and green. But he said, it would be a crime to talk about the Gamble House without concentrating on the craftsmen themselves that made the things happen inside that really make that house come to life. So Bob, here I am. I stayed in touch with him. I mean, he certainly influenced me in life, although I didn't do anything. I went in a different direction as far as my career, but I stayed a huge Los Angeles enthusiast. And I got involved particularly in my early to mid 50s in the idea of walking around or even hiking around, stiff hikes around Los Angeles and learning about the city and so talking about the city. And I became like an advocate for the public stairways. I wrote, besides this book, I wrote another book on the public stairways. And I led an average of 20 walks or hikes a year since 2009. And of course, this year I shut it down in March, and I haven't led people on a walk since, but we'll get back to that. And it's about, we walk 6, 8, 12 miles, but we do take time and talk about and just introduce people to neighborhoods and architecture and just to see how everything kind of works together. So Bob was very enthusiastic that I stayed in touch with him, and he would have our groups come into the bachelor house sometimes. And so it surprised me enormously. In 2015, I already had a meeting over at his house just to introduce somebody, and he asked me if I would like to come aboard and get out another edition. And I knew this was like sort of a bucket list thing for him, is not to let it die with the last edition. And I was overwhelmed by the question, but I certainly said yes, and that became my occupation for 3 years. And so this is in the last few years of Bob's life. On the left, his last public appearance. This was our book launch at Occidental College. And he actually spoke a little bit, and that's me pushing his wheelchair. And on the lower right, that's this wonderful lamp. He has a bachelor design of a lamp that's over his working dining room table in the bachelor house where he's signing books. But sadly, we got the book done, and then within 10, 12 weeks of when we finished it and had a new edition in his hand, he passed away at the beginning of February 2018. So it's been an honor to be around him, and of course I love now just listening to people who have Robert Winter stories, people who saw him all the time and have, he just was an amazing person that contributed so much to the city. So that's a little bit I have. Like I said, I could put on a whole show on Robert Winter, but that has been done. There was a good one done in Pasadena about a year ago. So that's what I have. I'll leave the screen and come back.
Bob, I wanted to say that I think once you start those walks again, I think our group would really like to have some information about that.
All right. Well, there's a couple people here that I see. Of course, Dan Gutierrez leads us on walks and has come in mind. I know I saw Kevin. Denny's in, but yes, and I'm trying to, it's a difficult thing. Number one, these walks are very popular because I don't charge anything for them, and I think when I come back, I'm gonna have to do them on weekdays, early mornings, to keep the head counts down. And I'm trying to do. I mean, that really is important for me to involve a wide spectrum of people to let them know the city. And I know not everyone can walk 9 miles, and I'm working on a project now. I just last Saturday I started from Pete's on Larchmont and did an 11-mile circle that went through West Hollywood and came back and just checked off a lot of architecture, new and old. And it's, it's this exciting area to be at the center of.
Nice. Do you know the Baxter stairs?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I'm right. That's right over here. I'm right up here with there. That's part of my routine to run up them. I don't run up. I walk up them is what I do. Yes.
Yeah.
I'd love to find out about those walks. But go ahead. I see other people. Rita, you have something?
I had two things. I wanted to ask Bob, you've written books on those stair walks, haven't you? Or because I remember having a book and I was following them and finding all these stairs and going up them. In fact, I live in Sherman Oaks now, and I found a little staircase right there up to Valley Vista Road, a little tiny narrow.
Oh, somebody else that we know.
There's 30 steps there, and if I do it 3 times, I go, that's 90 steps. That's my walk, And the other thing I want, so did you write a book on this, where to find these stairs?
Okay, I guess because I feel like I'm on Angel City's dime in a way, but I have another book coming out in the beginning of June with Falcon Press. That's Urban Hikes, Southern California. And the average walk is like 5.5 miles, and it goes from Santa Barbara, Ventura, the Valley, a lot in Los Angeles. And then, the Inland Empire, Orange County, down to San Diego. And that's 41 different hikes. A lot of them are very doable. Some are only 3 miles. Some of them none of them are longer than 9 miles. And so I'm still, that book is done as far as I'm, my part is just waiting to be churned out, but you'll see it after June 1. Published by Falcon Guides. That's my first book that is purely walking routes. Now, I showed you the cover of Finding Los Angeles by Foot was kind of a hybrid. It had some walks, but also had just descriptions of shortcuts and stairways and trails and things too.
Yeah, the second thing I wanted to say is I'm a docent at the Gamble House.
Oh.
So we're obviously very familiar with Robert. And after he passed away, his family let us go into the house and tour the house. I think we did a benefit there for ourselves there. So I've seen all those firsthand. It's a wonderful place.
Yeah, great. Yeah, he certainly had a connection there. And I was happy I got to speak upstairs in the Gamble House. I was supposed to be outdoors, but it was a rainy day and they moved me inside. And I thought, wow, what an honor.
No, I'm a cousin of the Gamble House, but when Robert Winter died, they let us go into the Bachelor House.
That's been great.
Okay. I didn't know if I made that clear. Okay.
Was that great? Did you enjoy it?
Oh, loved it.
Yeah, that fireplace, just that fireplace looks incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. What else? Who else questions for Bob? Anybody else? Yeah. Well, this has been great. This has been a wonderful time, and I'm so glad we finally got to do it after having to cancel the lecture that you were going to do in March. Across the street, by the way, from Marlene's house that you had a picture of, where's Marlene? Marlene, you there? No, Marlene's wife? No, with the house with the weather vane, the one on 6th and Hudson. The corner house.
I think, I think it's the Sisson house. Yeah,
exactly. That's the house that was right across the street from where you were going to have the lecture.
Really?
Yes, right across the street. And she's on our executive committee. This has been wonderful.
It's funny. I would have used that in this program, and then I had something leaping through your organization. I saw, oh, wonderful! The owner of that house is actually part of this organization. So, and
she was here, but she's not here. I don't see her now. Anyway, but this has been great. Anybody else have any question for Bob before we part? No, I guess not. Okay. Well, if you guys order the books, they'll come directly from Angel City Press. We hope to see you at the next ones. This has been a great lecture. I'm so glad we did it. I want to carry this book in my car and I'm going to enjoy it. It's a wonderful book. So, all right. I think that's it, right?
Fantastic.
Okay, good. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Juanita. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for covering, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Richard?
Yes.
This is Dan Gutierrez.
Hey, Dan.
I found you on Facebook. I'm going to send you a message with information on Bob's and my own and some other stairwalk groups. So expect a Facebook message with links. I have a website and I have all this stuff in one place so you don't have to go searching around for it.
Oh, so you guys do walks too?
Oh yeah, I created SoCal Stair Climbers. Bob has it's called what? Finding Los Angeles by Foot, but I think he calls it the Guide to Stairways of Los Angeles on Facebook. But I'll send you a web page that has links to all those different groups and bits of information, so you won't have to go searching for it.
Yeah,
So
and
just, we're not Facebook.
We'll
Yeah,
also
we're not
link that
Facebook
on our
friends yet.
website. Oh,
Yeah, so just look in your other messages and you'll see one for me shortly.
okay, great. I will. I'll look forward to it.
Okay,
All right,
very
thank
good.
you. All right. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Good night. See you, Clint.